Today, I want to talk about oil paint and acrylic paint and whether or not you can use them together. Many of us ask this question, and myself included, when I first got started, what's the big deal? Like they can or can't be used together? Well, the answer is yes and no. And here's where some of us can get tripped up, and it really doesn't need to be. If you have ever heard an experienced painter say the term fat over lean, that's a reference to oil paint versus acrylic paint and how you can use them. So oil paint, and I have some, I've dabbled in it. 𝐘𝐨𝐮'𝐿, these are my oil paints here. I've taken some classes on them. And so oil paints obviously are oil-based, which is fat, okay? It's a fat in oil. And acrylic is water-based, so we refer to that as lean. So when you say fat over lean, what they're essentially saying is you can have an acrylic paint on your canvas or surface, and you can paint oil over that, and it's fine. But here's the catch. You cannot have an oil painting and try to paint acrylic paint over that. It will not work. It will not adhere. They don't, they repel each other. If you ever try to mix oil and water, you see that they repel, they don't mix. And that's the same thing with oil paint versus acrylic paint. So let me just dive in a little bit more with this because I have my supplies here. And I just want to go through a couple things because many of you know that I do use oil stuff with my acrylics, and you can. So let's take a look at, let me pull up this here. All right, these are colored pencils. And the thing that you need to know about colored pencils, I use oil pencils, colored oil pencils. And unless it says oil on here, oil-based pencil, just know that they're going to be a water base. And so the only difference with that is when you put acrylic paint on it, since they're both water-based, you'll smear the pencil or potentially dissolve it completely, depending on how much paint you put on, how wet everything is. And if you want that look, that's fine. I found I tend to put too much and I would completely erase the colored pencil markings. So I switched to oil pencil. And these are just some of my oil pencils. They look exactly the same. You cannot tell unless you know it says oil pencil. And the reason I love these is because they stay. I can put paint over it and even transparent layers, and you can see the oil pencil just as I put it below. And I like that. It adds a layer of sophistication, visual texture, or just interest, right? Overall interest and softness that when the viewer is drawn in, there's another whole layer of things for them to look at, right? Okay, so pastels are another big thing. So these are Blick pastels. And this tripped me up initially too, because honestly, let me grab two colors here that are the same. So these are two pastels. Now, the same thing applies unless you see the word oil pastel, assume it's a chalk pastel. So that means when you put any sort of acrylic paint or wet thing on it, it's gonna wash away. And depending on the color, it's not always going to give a strong effect. It can completely disappear depending on how much moisture you put on there. So I use oil pastels. And you know, the brand is really up to you. I tend to use, these are Van Gogh's, and it's just a simple set that I bought, right? You can start with single ones in colors you like, or just a small set and experiment with it. You'll find brands that you like. I tend to prefer Van Gogh, 𝐘𝐨𝐿. Those are my two. Very common out there. So the thing with these is they won't move when you put oil acrylic paint on it, right? And depending on how moist, how thick, you know, of a layer, how thick of a layer I put this and how much paint I put over it. Sometimes, because they don't mix, I can literally, when the paint is dry, and this is really cool, you should try it, I can find where this is and I gently scrape away the dried acrylic paint and this comes through. And it's really cool, you know, if you want to add some more interest, right? And these colors can be very intense. I love the fact that they don't wash away. Now, I've also switched and gone on to, you know, ones that I love. Let me grab a couple here. Larger versions of, and it's just the same thing. It's one of these, just larger, right? It's 𝐘𝐨𝐿, one of my preferred. And I like this because it's got enough oil in it, but it's not overly moist, meaning it can dry a lot quicker. And so sometimes, and this is the inconsistent part, sometimes when I let it dry, really dry, if I've let a painting sit for a while, and these dry faster, I can paint acrylic over it. And there's times I can't scrape it away. It won't come off, but that's the inconsistent part. I cannot always count on that. So you have to be okay with that. And when it comes through, it comes through. Another brand I use is called R&F Oil Paint Pigments. Now, they come in cases like this, and they tend to have a much higher oil count in here, and they can be very intense in color. I love them. But I will admit, these can take months to dry on a painting. And so I tend to use them towards the end of a painting because I get impatient and I just, you know, I want to keep painting. And so you can experiment with that too. And if you're okay with, you know, getting those results, it's a great thing to play around with. Now, when we paint with oil paint, oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, when you use oil paints here, you have to use one of these little things. And they look like this inside. You cannot dip your brushes in water. It won't do a thing to the paint. If you want to clean your brushes, you use them in here. And then you can let them soak in there for a while too. And you don't dump this out. It's meant to be filled with turpentine, or now a less odor option is like mineral spirits that they use in here. If you have patience, if you don't have small kids around, and you have the time, oil painting may be a great thing for you. I found that with my lifestyle, small kids at the time when I was learning, it wasn't really a good option for me to have around the house. So I switched over to acrylic paint. I still dabble with it here and there, but I love the fact that the new acrylic paints can really be painted thick enough that often untrained eyes can't tell if it's oil or acrylic, right? The colors are luxurious now. They're thick, they are very intense, and they do a great job. And many of the professional painters that have been at this for a while really think that, you know, the Impressionist paintings, couldn't think of the word, the Impressionist artists at the time, they were rebels, right? They went against the grain. They used colors that were not accepted at time in the society, but we all love them now. And they were ahead of their time. And many artists believe that because of the rebels that they were, open to trying new things, that they would have switched over to these acrylic paints right away. And so I just want you to encourage you to experiment with this and just know what you're getting into, right? Now, if you want to use things like charcoal, even I would say mainly these chalk ones, and you want to ensure that it has a better chance of not getting washed away, there is something you can do on it, but I don't always have the patience for it, or I don't remember. And so when I work fast, it just becomes a mess. But you can spray something on here called Spectra Fix. It's a 𝐘𝐨𝐮'𝐵ased, and And I believe, yeah, it's safe for oil and charcoal chalk pastels. But in my opinion, you don't need it over oil pastel. You really don't need it because it's not going to wash away. So I would use this basically on all of the water-based ones, like chalk pastels, watercolor pencils. You spray it on, but you have to let it dry completely, and you might have to do a couple of coatings of spray. And then when it's completely dry, you should be able to paint over without worrying about the pencil markings or the pastel markings washing away. And it's not a 100% guarantee in my experience, but it definitely does help. And if you want to experiment with something like that, you can. But the big thing to remember is the fat over lean concept. You can always start with an acrylic based painting and then put oil over it, and you know, it doesn't really hurt anything, but you just can't go the other way around. And if you are going to use oil pastels, oil pencils, then just know that they have the ability to not adhere to the paint that goes on top if it's acrylic, and you can almost always scrape it away. And if you're okay with that, then you know, it's a really cool thing to play with and have fun with it.